it's actually those differences that bring vibrancy and vitality to relationships, that they really benefit from each of you showing up as who God is calling you to be.
Welcome to This Whole Life, a podcast for all of us seeking sanity and sanctity, and a place to find joy and meaning through the integration of faith and mental health. I'm Pat Millay, a Catholic speaker, musician, and leader, and I'm here with my bride, Kenna, a licensed marriage and family therapist. This is the stuff she and I talk about all the time, doing dishes, in the car, on a date. We're excited to bring you this podcast for educational purposes. It's not therapy or a substitute for mental health care. So come on in, have a seat at our dining room table, and join the conversation with us. We are so glad you're here.
So listen to me now. I'm not gonna stand here with my friends down and out.
Welcome to This Whole Life, everybody. Hello, my dear beloved. How are you?
I am good. How are you, babe?
I'm doing great. I should say welcome back, because for the first time ever,
Yes.
we can tell people welcome back.
We are back.
It is episode 2 of This Whole Life, and we're glad that you stuck around for episode 2.
Yes.
It's only getting better from
So
here.
grateful. So grateful to you. Super excited about this lineup of intro episodes we've got going on right now. Just some of the bread and butter stuff that I love sharing with my clients and love thinking about in my own life and has been so helpful in my own life. So yeah, pumped to have you all back with us.
Yeah, these are kind of your greatest hits, right?
Yeah, I mean, Pat, we honestly did discuss, is it wise for us to just open up the treasure trove and share some of these core tenets of how I work with clients to integrate their mental health and their faith. But they're too good to keep to ourselves. We got to share these. So looking forward to just laying the foundation in these first episodes and then digging deeper as time goes on.
And that's a beauty. Even though these things are crucial and important, they go really deep. So we're going to keep unfolding these for episode after episode after episode. And I think there's just a ton of beauty to be found.
Yeah. And many ways to apply it and to see it actually show up in our life.
Yeah.
So yeah. So let's get started talking about our highs and hards.
Let's do it. Yeah.
Where are you at, babe? What's been going on for you lately?
So there was a situation in the past week. Okay. We're recording this in the end of the summer months. It's the dog days of summer. And as happens fairly often, you, my bride, have come up with a great idea, and I have been
Are you about
hesitant
to throw me under the
to
bus?
follow through on it. No, you've come with
Publicly?
a genuinely good idea. So here's the deal for all of you listening out there. We have had this backyard pool in our garage for a year, right? Last summer we got
maybe
it.
longer than a year. Yeah.
Maybe more than a year.
Yeah,
And it's one of the ones where you fill up it's like a big, huge 8-foot inflatable pool. So you fill up the ring with air, and then it takes hundreds and hundreds of gallons of water. And it's a decent sized just backyard pool, right? I do not love doing a lot of work to set up a pool that is just going to get drained.
To be fair, our most recent experience with the pool prior to this was pretty negative and short-lived. So I can get why, you were a little hesitant and a little gun shy. I get that.
Let's put it this way. This is the second pool that we have been asked to set up in the backyard. So anyway, it was very hot last week, or this week, I should say. And Kenna, for all of you out there, came to me one day and said, listen, it's going to be very hot. Can you please set up the pool in the backyard for the kids? And the hard part was setting up the pool was the hard part, the physical annoyance and labor of setting up the pool. The more difficult hard part was me dealing with my own selfishness, basically.
Oh,
just
okay.
I don't want to do this. Just being a little bit sour and a little bit jaded about how effective it was even going to be. Are the kids even going to use it? Is this going to be a waste of time? So that kind of self-concern was not a great shining moment in my past week. But I did it. And then, of course, it leads to my high, right? Which was yesterday afternoon. I was sitting on the porch, literally just watching all of our children play in the pool. and they were mostly happy, even though they were all in the pool at the same time. Yeah. It was very beautiful. So
Aw.
you were very much right.
Well, I'm glad the story has a happy ending for you, because I was at work and I had no idea that you were having such an interior struggle with filling up the pool.
It was a minor interior struggle, but it was hard for sure. Yeah. The first pool did not lead to a high.
Okay.
But the second pool did. It's great. Yeah. Enough about me. What about yours?
I thought you were going to say the hard was doing the thing I asked you to do and then enjoying it, like acknowledging that, like
that you were right.
I was going to go that far, but yeah. So yeah, my high and my hard. Well, I'm going to start with my hard to end on a high note for all you Seinfeld lovers. So yeah, I'd say, this week, maybe week and a half, I've just been aware of people in my life, some very close to me, others more at a distance, but who are just going through grief, through death of loved ones. And it touches on my own grief in my own life. Someday we'll get to share with you all about our own journey of grief and what has helped us in our mental health through that. But yeah, so just, that it's a totally normal and understandable situation that when others you care about are grieving, it touches something in you. And so it's hard. Those are hard emotions to be with. I'm grateful that I'm a little bit wiser each time and can sit with that and give myself the space that I need. But that's definitely been a hard thing this week, seeing it show up in a lot of different ways in me. Yeah. And I'd say the high, I actually just figured this out this morning. I was chatting with a girlfriend and I was talking about sleep, and sleep is like a perennially difficult issue for me. And recently, I asked Pat, I was like, okay, I'm going to buckle. I'm going to succumb to the pressure to find something different in regard to sleep, because my current routine is not working. My current setup isn't working. And so Pat, you very generously set me up with a double egg mattress pad, which means that our bed is my side of the bed is 4 inches higher than yours. I feel like we're in one of those sleep number beds. It's like the poor man's sleep number.
Kind of literally is on her high horse.
Yeah.
When we
I tell him all the time, I feel like the Princess and the Pea. But here's the thing. I'm realizing, Pat, for the last 5 nights, I think we've had it for 5 nights now, I am actually sleeping. It's hard for me to get out of bed in the morning because I'm so happy in our bed. And so we're actually going to go camping this weekend. You guys, I'm going to bring my mattress bed with me and I'm going to set it up in the bunk bed of the cabin, because it is just improving my mental clarity, my patience. It is radiating goodness into my life to have this double mattress pad. So thank you, Target, for the $19.99 bed accoutrement that is really changing my life.
And for everyone out there, it needs to be said, you are not a princess in any way, shape, or form. You are a tough woman. You have given birth to 7 children naturally and powerfully. And maybe just this one thing, your body is you know what? I'm making my stand. I'm demanding this,
The evidence is undeniable right now that my body wants the mattress pad. So that's my high. Good sleep at a cheap cost, actually. So thank you again, Target.
So if there's a theme, it's that Kenna asks me to do something that's a mild inconvenience, but it's definitely worth it. Which is a dangerous precedent to set, because then anything she wants me to do, I have no ground to stand on if I don't want to do it. So, here we are. That's okay.
Oh, awesome. Well, thanks for, touching base with me and sharing a little bit about your week, because I didn't know that about the pool for you. So let's roll into our topic for today, which is talking about boundaries. Talking about healthy relationships and acknowledging how much that contributes to our mental health and also to our relationship with the Lord, because what we do in our human relationships help to form the way that we communicate with and are just present to God Himself. So talking today about boundaries as this balance of being able to hold on to one's own identity, my own identity, and being intimately connected to others. So here we go again with the great Catholic both and. We are masters of that tension between things that seem, to the naked eye, they seem like they should be opposed to each other. And yet, like the Lord says, like, nope, I've made you to be able to hold these things in tension. So clinically speaking, we call this differentiation. So in the world of marriage and family therapy, in the world of family systems theory, we talk about this as differentiation.
So boundaries for us human beings who are called to be individuals and also called to be in relationship with our fellow children of God, boundaries for us are the pathway to true connection and relationships. They are the way that we accomplish the goal that all of us feel, which is genuine connection with others. I don't care how introverted somebody might be, they still want genuine connection with others, maybe in very different ways than an extrovert, but still they desire that connection. And just for all of us, for the two of us sitting here, for everyone listening, how many of our struggles with day-to-day mental health involve boundary issues in our relationships with others? A lot of times we think of mental health as things that happen just inside our own head. But the fact is that our relationships, the things that happen between people, those have a lot to do with our own mental health, with our own perception of the world and of ourselves. So, we get into these thought processes, these narratives, these questions like, should I talk to them about this thing, or should I wait for them to talk to me? I don't want to rub them the wrong way or step on their feet or something. Like I can't tell them the truth about how I'm feeling because they're just going to get really mad, something like, I don't feel like going to that party or to whatever that thing is, but it's easier to just go along with what everyone else wants to do, kind of sacrificing my own preferences, my own identity for the sake of what others desire. Thinking maybe in a marriage or in a family situation, something like, my spouse is having a bad day, so I have to be the one to overcompensate. I'm not allowed to be sad right now because they're sad and they're struggling, and even to the limit, maybe something as deep and as troubling and difficult as saying, that person, he or she, is just a toxic person. I'm done with them. I'm going to cut them off entirely. These are really problematic boundaries, all of them, because one of the most common causes of our nagging anxieties, our personalizing of disagreements, these flawed internal narratives that we have, a lot of those are because boundaries have been violated or not set in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, boundaries or this idea of differentiation, it's one of my favorite things to work with clients on because it allows them to conceptualize how they might have an influence on some of the most important relationships in their life, but those are relationships that are causing them distress. And so it really helps to empower clients to think about differentiation. So again, my definition of differentiation is holding on to myself while being open to connection with the other. And our healthiest relationships are what we call dyadic relationships, where it's one-on-one, two people connecting. And we'll, address in other episodes about triangulation and some of the other less healthy and helpful ways that we get pulled into connection. But just to bear that in mind, that differentiation is holding on to myself, having my feet firmly planted in my authentic self, and also being open to the influence and to the connection with the other. So my favorite way to talk about this, I'm very much a visual learner. And I love talking to my clients with metaphors or sharing these ideas with metaphors and letting them try it out and play around with it a little bit. So my favorite way to talk about this is to use the idea of a garden. And my most common visual that comes into my head, so I'll just share it with you all, is if you've seen that classic rom-com, The Holiday, featuring Kate Winslet, Cameron Diaz, Jack Black, and Jude Law. Cameron Diaz goes to Kate Winslet's sweet, quaint, really quite simple and modest English cottage. It's this one-person cottage tucked away. It has this lovely English garden around it and then this fence. And so if you can envision for yourself that you too have a cottage or a cabin or a hut, whatever one person dwelling you would like to imagine for yourself, but it's your space That's your, place to recharge, to renew, to be really connected with the Lord, that sanctuary of yours. And then you step out of that cottage space and you're in this garden. And that garden is the area that you get to decide what you want to do with it. You get to decide, do you want to grow prize-winning roses, or do you want to have a salsa garden with cilantro and peppers and onions in there? Your garden gets to be what you decide of it. As Christians, we would say in collaboration with the Lord, like, what is he calling you to cultivate in your garden? And then to delineate that space, imagine a waist-high picket fence. And I think of it as one of those fences where there's space between the pickets. So it's airy, it's welcoming, it's inviting. It's that kind of fence that says very clearly, like, this is, inside of this boundary, I'm going to be responsible for these things. I'm going to take ownership and be accountable for what goes on in here. If the grass needs mowing, I'll be the one to mow it. If a decision needs to be made on whether to pull that rose bush and call it a day on it, or to fertilize it and try to bring it back to life, like, I get to be the one to make that decision. So it's not a 10-foot tall cinder block wall, and it's not an invisible fence that, people might trespass over and not even realize that they're treading on my turf. So this idea of the garden is one of the ways that I find it most helpful to think about what goes on for me in my relationships. How comfortable is it for me to take ownership of what's mine, and also to be connected to my neighbors? So when I think about my garden, I think of Pat as being my immediate next door neighbor. I think of our children as being in our little neighborhood here, and that fence line, that shared fence line, is my connection to them. And it's at that fence line that I would imagine a fence post where we connect. So for example, when I want to share something with Pat, especially if I, want his feedback and his input, or I want to be known by him, I imagine walking up to that fence post, asking him if he'd meet me there, and just like leaning up against it, kind of casually, and just placing what I've got there on the fence post, and giving him the freedom to decide what he wants to do, how he wants to react to what I've just placed there. So notice that kind of thing can't happen if there isn't a fence at all, or if there's a 10-foot tall cinder block wall, right? That wall, that tall wall says, I don't want connection with you. I don't want to be influenced by you. I don't want to be impacted by you. And that invisible fence makes it very difficult for each of us to know what is ours to own. Because even as a married couple, there's still distinction in Pat's identity and mine. The Lord is calling us to different things within this vocation that we share to be married together. So this fence, these boundaries, can be really helpful in starting to, wrap our arms around this unique, authentic call and relationship we have with the Lord. The other thing, I'll just take a moment before I throw it back to you, Pat, but one of the things I talk about with my clients too is that the theorist who developed this, his name is Murray Bowen, he said that we lack these, picket fence type boundaries. We lack differentiation because of anxiety. And he says, so in response to relational tension, let's say, that's what he meant by anxiety, not clinical anxiety, but just like stress and tension and just discomfort in the relationship. He says we tend to go one of two ways. We either go, it's too much, and we build that 10-foot tall cinder block wall and we cut off. Or, he said, the anxiety is so much and we go, I need to be one with you. And we either go into our neighbor's yard and allow ourselves to morph into, what they've got going on, or we demand that they come into ours, and that, connection and relationship can only occur if there's fusion, if there's enmeshment. So just to, hold that in mind. Okay, what is it that draws us off track of having good boundaries, solid, clear boundaries? It's because there's tension inside of us. It's uncomfortable at times to hold to our authentic self.
And somehow, even in the midst of everything you just laid out there, it is possible to do that and to still be myself, right? To hold on to myself and be connected to you.
That's the ideal, yeah.
Exactly. It's possible, and that's the ideal. I mean, I think it can be confusing for people sometimes, especially coming out of a Catholic mindset where we hear over and over in the course of a marriage that it's the two becoming one, right? And that sacramental reality is 100% true immediately after the sacrament takes place, right? But that would be a really unhealthy way for a married couple to live their social relationship, their actual human relationship. When we got married, you did not become me, I did not become you, and it would be really problematic if we did.
Yeah, and really that is something that I often see, working with my clients is there is this assumption that becoming one in personality, in preferences, in needs, what it really practically looks like is one or both are dismissing themselves and aren't living out the fullness of who they're called to be. And so, what we're hoping to share today too is the good news of it's actually those differences that bring vibrancy and vitality to relationships, that they really benefit from each of you showing up as who God is calling you to be.
The funny scripture verse that I think that really supports this well is Proverbs is just full of gems. Some of them are true, just wise gems, and some of them are gems that are hilarious and a little salty, right?
Maybe need a little dusting off or smoothing around the edges, maybe.
So Proverbs 25, verse 17 says, "Let your foot be seldom in your neighbor's house, lest they have their fill of you and hate you."
Oh my gosh, I've never heard that before. That's like, don't go trespassing on your neighbor's garden. Like I talk about that with my clients. I'll say what I don't really want to hear about is that your husband wakes up tomorrow morning and finds that you've been weeding his garden in the middle of the night. That's a metaphor, right? These are emotional realities we're talking about right now. But yeah, absolutely.
So the writer of Proverbs might have been saying, leave your neighbor alone because they're sick of you being at their house for dinner every night. But what that means for us is we get the privilege of minding our own garden, and I don't get to mow your lawn or choose your paint color or any of that stuff, right?
Yeah. And again, it's that balance, right? Of no, I don't get to trespass and come uninvited into that space. And also, I get to be with you and connect with you at that fence post. And you may very well ask my input about what paint color, you should paint your cottage, or, what you should do with your rose bush. And I hope that I can be in a place of openness to you and connection with you in that.
Because the point of boundaries is that what we desire as human beings is true intimacy. We're made for relationship with God. We're made for relationship with each other. We desire intimacy. We get tempted sometimes to think that intimacy means I have to be the same as you. For us to be close, we have to be the same. And that is a lie. It is not true. Mm-hmm. True intimacy doesn't come out of similarity. It comes out of connection. Yeah. It comes out of complementarity in a way, but it comes out of connection, that even in our differences, we're able to be connected by meeting at the fence post, by being open, being honest, and accepting what the other has to bring as well.
Yeah, and I think it is appropriate here to acknowledge that that difference, though, as humans, it doesn't always go smoothly, right? To recognize, you and I, Pat, had something happen this week where we really butted up against personality differences, and it, created conflict in our marriage, and we had to address that. And we want to just be clear that this is not smooth sailing just because we get this idea and we're like, oh, that's the ideal, let's go for it. Absolutely, it creates discomfort, right? That's why Bowen says that's why we get tempted to build the 10-foot tall wall or to mow down the fence and be like, that's too much, let's just be a mishmash together. That what we hope we can continue to share with all of our listeners and live out in our own lives are some of the tools also that help us cope with that discomfort. But really today, our thesis is it's worth it, that there's so much good that comes out of thinking about what are my boundaries like right now? What are the ways in which I am really showing up and holding on to myself and being open to connection with others?
So if we're going to get practical, right, if we're going to take this boundaries conversation to true day-to-day life, and especially Christian life, what would some practical examples look like?
Yeah. Well, I mean, first of all, you touched on this earlier, Pat, but I think it is worth saying again that differentiation doesn't mean that we don't care or sacrifice for others. Like, absolutely, especially when we're talking about being Christians, we're talking about vocations of service, right? We're all called to serve, to emulate Christ, to pour out our lives for others. And so we want to be clear that differentiation, we think, actually empowers us as individuals to be able to sacrifice for others. It's in owning ourselves that we can then give it away. It's in that self-possession, and I mean that in a Christian sense, that we can then make a gift of ourselves. So it's being able to notice, like, where do I end and you begin? Being able to honor that there doesn't have to be conformity and uniformity within the relationship for there to be connection. I know that, for us in our marriage, particularly, like, it was a slow process of learning how to be open and honest with each other and not expecting any specific reaction in return. And that's hard to feel like, okay, I'm going to be authentically myself and seek connection for you. And I'm going to give you the freedom to be authentically yourself. And so your response may not be what I was hoping for. And can I be okay with that? Like, can I make room for that and actually desire that you showed up in your honesty over desiring a particular answer from you? And it means that I get to make sacrifices and care for you because that's who I am and that's who I hear God calling me to be. It's what I'm choosing to do. I'm engaging my will, not out of fear that I'll lose you, that you'll abandon me, or that you'll think ill of me and devalue me, but because I want to make sacrifices and I don't carry resentment about that.
And as difficult as it can be in a marriage, your value doesn't come from me. That even if I don't approve of you, which I would never go that far, but even if I didn't, that's not where your value comes from. And that is maybe one of the most difficult things for humans to do, especially in a marriage. But the truth remains that our value comes from our Father, and our spouses are welcomed into that relationship
God,
as
our
well.
Father.
From God our Father,
Yes,
exactly, right.
yes, totally.
Not even our earthly fathers, exactly.
Right.
Boundaries are Christian. Being a healthy Christian means having healthy boundaries with every other human being that we encounter. So while sacrificial love is a necessity of Christian life, and it's almost simple enough to say that sacrificial love is the Christian life, it's also possible to maintain these healthy boundaries and to stay differentiated in the process of practicing sacrificial love. We're going to talk about this in many future episodes, but it's just important to lay that out first of all, that this is an important step in Christian maturity.
Okay, I kind of love and I kind of hate that you brought that up because it is certainly the ideal. And I think for me and maybe for some of our listeners, like, it can be tempting to get down on ourselves and to just see that as such a lofty hope and to see, like, I'm still here on the ground. So I don't know, listeners, if you're with me on that and that's a lot to wrap your mind around, like, know that we are in the boat together, because this is hard. This is a hard call to answer, to walk this fine line. Yeah, just we want to give you some space to let this idea marinate of differentiation, of boundaries, of the both and, of holding on to your authentic self and being open to connection with others. So just to, I guess invite you to think about this as you're going about life and recognizing it in relationships, being aware of some of the thoughts and some of the ideas you have about your relationships in your own head, because not everyone is going to appreciate and love this message. Sometimes people perceive boundaries as a threat or an inconvenience because they themselves don't yet know how to live a differentiated life, or they're worried about a boundary creating disconnect with you. And it can be hard. Our fear can be so overwhelming because we want so desperately to be known and to know the other, that to think about taking any space, even, a white picket fence amount of space, can be really threatening to that love that we want. So, nevertheless, differentiation and modeling healthy boundaries is the call. We believe that. I see it work for the good of my clients' mental health and the witness of health to others. I've seen it in my own life really bear fruit, to come into, as Pat was talking about, that mature Christian identity and into those relationships.
And if we're looking for a model of how this can look, how this ought to look, if we're looking for an ideal, something to set our eyes on, all we have to do is look at the person of Jesus. Your Catholic vocab word for the week is hypostatic union. So it's this truth of the person of Christ that we know already, that Jesus at all times in his earthly life was 100% human and 100% divine 100% of the time. He wasn't human sometimes and God other times. He wasn't some strange blend of human and God, like a demigod or like a smoothie of divinity and humanity. He was all God, all human, all the time. And in his person, we have these two natures, the human nature and the divine nature, that are the model of a healthy relationship for us humans. That in Jesus, his humanity and his divinity were united without obsession, and they were also distinct without divorce or separation. So in our relationships, whether it's a marriage between a husband and wife, whether it's a parent with a child, whether it's a friendship relationship, we are called, appropriate to that relationship, to be united to the other without obsession, without losing ourselves for the sake of them. And we're also called to be distinct, to be different people without separation, without distance, without cutoff. So we're called to be connected without confusion, without losing ourselves. And we're also called to be distinct without cutoff, without distant separation.
Yeah. So again, that great both and, that real fine balance that, Bowen, the theorist who came up with the concept of differentiation, he said, we'll be doing this our whole lives. We will be pursuing differentiation our whole lives. No one fully arrives because we live in these dynamic relationships and our self is ever unfolding and ever evolving. And I think as Christians, that is great news for us because who I am today doesn't dictate who I have to be tomorrow. That with God's grace, I can continue to move closer to the ideals of the saints.
So when we have boundaries, we feel the freedom to be our authentic selves, and this will, God willing, lead us to be sacrificial and selfless, because that's exactly what we were created for. God wants our free will to be engaged, and that's why he doesn't impose, because he gave us this beautiful gift. He desires for us to use it for his glory.
Beautiful. Oh my gosh. Okay. I love this. So how do we take boundaries and differentiation and actually apply it in our real lives? I think we can start to do that through our challenge by choice this week. So think back, maybe a situation from the last day or so, one that, now thinking back on it, you can recognize that you weren't responding from a differentiated stance. You can see now that the fence was not clearly and securely in place between you and this person. So maybe that was, your child melting down. And even though you were feeling peaceful and joyful up until that moment of the tantrum, when you witnessed their sad, mad, scared feelings, you started melting down too. Or maybe it's the opposite of that kind of a situation, that a friend was sharing their scared, vulnerable feelings, was really opening up to you, and you can now see that you shut down, that you walled up, that it felt too big, too much in that moment, and it felt too risky to remain open to connection. So whatever it was, if you can recall that situation and consider what could it have looked like to remain differentiated in the midst of it. So, whether that was holding on to peaceful feelings while the toddler is tantruming. Would it have looked like you stooping down to their level, modeling deep breaths, and just riding out the storm? As hard as that sounds to me right now. They're all flailing legs and screaming, and you're not walking away. You're not yelling back. You're not losing your cool. You're holding on to your sense of peace while remaining present to them. Or with that friend situation, could it have looked like, saying to them in that moment, whoa, my dear friend, even just listening to you tell me this story, it sounds so overwhelming. So remaining differentiated in not feeling compelled to fix it for them or to get roped into taking care of it or of them, but validating and acknowledging the legitimate difficulty they're facing and sharing, being connected to them in the midst of their hardship and their pain.
That is a beautiful and difficult challenge for the week. That's great for you and me and for all of our good listeners.
I'm going to go get my journal and spend some time with that right now.
I can think of about 5 examples this morning that I could have been more differentiated. But well, friends, as we wrap up, as always, we can't encourage you enough to do all of the podcast things. So please take a moment to subscribe, to share this episode with a friend, to rate and review. Again, this makes such a huge difference for all of the good people that will be able to see this podcast on their player of choice and be able to learn about this differentiated life. You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook at This Whole Life Podcast, and on Twitter at This Whole Life. And again, we want to hear from you. We want to hear what your struggles are, what your feedback is, your thoughts, your questions. So please send us a message. You can send us a note on our website at thiswholelifepodcast.com or on any of those social media things that we already mentioned, and we cannot wait to hear from you. Go out there, enjoy this whole life, and we will see you next time.
See you next time, guys. Bye. This Whole Life is a production of the Martin Center for Integration. Visit us online at thiswholelifepodcast.com. Oh my gosh. I mean,
Well, there's a truck anyway. It's okay.
okay.
It's better to wait.
And you're drinking.
Okay, go ahead.